The chandelier glittered like liquid fire, casting diamonds of light across the grand Valemont ballroom. Guests laughed, champagne flutes clinked, and a live orchestra played soft jazz, the perfect backdrop for a wedding that looked like a dream. But at one table, a woman sat perfectly still, her fingers circling the rim of her glass. Her name was Ariana Valemont, and she'd discovered a truth no one in this room could imagine. Across the hall, her husband Damien laughed with a glass in hand, charming, flawless, adored by everyone. Beside him stood her new sister-in-law, Isolde, radiant in white, veil shimmering like silk mist. They were beautiful, untouchable, and guilty. Ariana's heart didn't race anymore. It had done enough of that. Now it beat slowly, deliberately, counting down to the moment when the truth would no longer hide. Welcome to Mr. Donovan's Stories. If you're new here, thank you for joining us, and if you're returning, welcome back. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because what you're about to hear is not just a story about betrayal, it's about courage, truth, and the cost of peace. Callan Valemont, the groom, her brother, raised his glass, his joy bright and unguarded. "To love that lasts a lifetime," he said. The crowd cheered, unaware that within the hour his lifetime promise would break in front of everyone. Ariana forced a smile. She had promised herself she wouldn't ruin her brother's day. But when she looked at Damien, she saw not a husband, but a stranger wrapped in her memories. When she saw Isolde, she saw a mirror of deceit. Her phone buzzed under the table, a message from an unknown number. "If you don't speak tonight, he'll keep lying tomorrow." She turned the screen face down. She didn't need the reminder. The universe had already written this ending. All she had to do was give it a voice. Later that evening, the lights dimmed for the toasts. Callan smiled and gestured toward her. "My sister Ariana will say a few words." Her breath stilled. "This is it." She rose gracefully, gown trailing like shadowed silk. The microphone waited in her hand, light, fragile, dangerous. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "It's an honor to speak for my brother and his beautiful bride." The audience leaned in. Ariana's smile was soft, but her words began to carve through the room. Weddings remind us of what love is meant to be, not perfect but honest, because love built on lies can look beautiful, until the truth decides to arrive. Laughter faltered. Glasses stilled. Even the orchestra's notes seemed to fade beneath her tone. "Some people forget that vows aren't about performance," she continued. "They're about truth. And when someone breaks that truth, no matter how pretty the disguise, the heart always finds out." She raised her glass, gaze locked on her husband. "So here's to love brave enough to tell the truth, even when it hurts." A ripple of unease passed through the guests. Callan smiled uncertainly, thinking it just his sister's poetic style. Damien's grin faltered. Isolde's knuckles whitened around her bouquet. Ariana took her seat. Damien leaned toward her, whispering sharply, "What are you doing?" She didn't look at him. "Whatever I should have done a long time ago." The rest of the evening unfolded in uneasy rhythm. The orchestra resumed. Laughter forced its way back into the air, but the spell had broken. Beneath the music, tension grew like a heartbeat no one could silence. Hours later, the ballroom glowed under dimmed lights as the staff prepared a surprise slideshow. Memories of the happy couple. Guests gathered eagerly, phones out, waiting for the screen to light up. Callan beamed. A little something for everyone who believed in our love story. The first photo appeared, Callan and Isolde, smiling at the engagement dinner. Applause. The next, the family together, radiant with pride. More applause. Then, without warning, a new image flickered onto the screen, one no one had prepared. Isolde on a sunlit terrace, Damien beside her, his hand on her face, a kiss frozen in time. Gasps spread like fire through the hall. Someone dropped a glass. The music died mid-note. Callan's smile vanished as his eyes locked on the image, then on his sister, then on his best friend. His lips parted, but no words came. Ariana sat motionless, her expression unreadable, her eyes steady. She hadn't sent that image, but fate had chosen its own moment of truth. Damien leapt to his feet. That's not what it looks like. Ariana rose slowly, microphone in hand once more. Her voice cut through the chaos, calm as ice. It looks exactly like what it is. The room froze. Every guest stared. At her, at him, at the bride whose tears had already begun to fall. Callan's voice broke the silence. Is this true? Isolde trembled, unable to speak. Her silence was enough. The chandelier light fractured across the marble like shattering glass. In that moment, everything beautiful turned brittle, and the truth finally stood without disguise. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to Mr. Donovan's Stories, because what happens next will silence every whisper and remind you that when truth walks into a room, it never leaves quietly. For a heartbeat, the ballroom stood still, the orchestra waiting on a single cue that never came. All eyes shifted toward Ariana as Callan lifted his glass and smiled. "My sister would like to say a few words," he announced, his tone bright and proud. He had no idea that with those words, he had just opened the door to a storm. Ariana rose from her chair, the satin of her gown catching the light in gentle waves. 1,000 tiny crystals from the chandelier glimmered against the gold of her hair. The attention didn't frighten her, it steadied her. She felt as if time had paused to grant her one clear breath before everything changed. She took the microphone, the soft murmur of the crowd folding into silence. "Thank you, Callan," she said, her voice calm, the kind of calm that comes when the heart has already broken and rebuilt itself in seconds. "It's an honor to speak on a day that means so much to our family." Applause fluttered politely, then faded. Ariana's gaze swept the room, rows of faces shining with wine and contentment, the photographers poised for another perfect picture. Damien sat near the front, his smile composed, his hand resting lightly on the table. Isolde stood beside her new husband, radiant, flawless, the veil cascading down her shoulders like a river of light. Ariana drew a breath. "Weddings remind us of what love is meant to be," she began. "Not the kind that lives in fairy tales, but the kind that requires honesty, because without it, even beauty loses its meaning." The room shifted slightly. A few heads tilted. Her words weren't the light-hearted toast they expected. "Love, to me," she continued, "isn't about perfection. It's about truth. It's about seeing someone fully and choosing them anyway." She paused, her gaze landing briefly on Damien. "But what happens," she asked softly, "when the person you chose forgets to be honest?" A murmur moved through the hall. Callan frowned, uncertain whether to step in. Damien's smile stiffened, his fingers tightening around the stem of his glass. "I'm not here to lecture," Ariana said quickly, her tone still even, almost warm. "I'm here to remind us that promises matter. Vows matter. Because when we make them, we offer our word, not just to our partner, but to everyone who believes in us." She turned her attention to her brother and his new bride. "Callan, Isolde," she said, her smile gentle, "you are beginning a life together. My wish for you is that your love remains honest, because if it isn't, no amount of wealth, beauty, or applause will protect it." Isolde's expression flickered, so slight it might have gone unnoticed, except Ariana saw everything now. Her sister-in-law's knuckles whitened around the bouquet. Damien shifted in his seat, glancing at the guests as though searching for an exit hidden behind all that gold. Ariana lifted her glass. "So here's to love that is brave enough to tell the truth. To hearts that don't hide behind secrets." The audience applauded, unsure whether they were hearing a blessing or a warning. The music started again, faint, uneasy. Callan stood, hugging his sister with genuine affection. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "You always know how to speak from the heart." She smiled, and her voice barely carried above the music. "Always." As the guests turned back to their tables, Ariana slipped away from the spotlight and returned to her seat. Damien leaned toward her, whispering through his teeth, "What was that supposed to mean?" She kept her eyes on the stage. "Whatever you think it means, don't start," he muttered, trying to keep his composure. "This isn't the time." Her voice was low, steady. "You're right. But the time's coming." He fell silent, pretending to focus on the waiter refilling their glasses. The scent of champagne mingled with tension, sharp enough to taste. Across the room, Isolde avoided Ariana's gaze completely. She clung to Callan's arm, smiling for photographs, her laughter ringing too bright, too rehearsed. Ariana watched her carefully, noting the tremor beneath that glow. A sudden hush spread through the room as Callan called for the next toast. The microphone passed from hand to hand, first to a friend of the groom, then to a business partner, each speech blurring into the next. But the calm had already fractured. The perfect rhythm of the evening was offbeat now, every word heavy with the echo of Ariana's toast. At the head table, Damien's charm began to crumble. He laughed too loudly, drank too quickly, shifted in his chair too often. When Isolde's glance brushed past him, he looked away at once. The unspoken connection between them had turned from secret pleasure to silent panic. Ariana noticed everything. She spoke little, ate nothing, and smiled only when someone looked her way. Inside, her resolve was forming like steel in a forge. Tonight, she would not simply react, she would act. This is the moment when the air starts to change. You can feel it, can't you? That quiet unease settling between the laughter. Stay with me, because the next few minutes will test every mask in this room. The band shifted into a slower tune. Couples moved to the dance floor, the gentle rhythm disguising the strain that had begun to spread like a whisper. Damien offered Ariana his hand, perhaps hoping to reclaim normalcy. "Dance with me?" he asked, his smile thin. "Of course," she said. Her fingers rested in his, the gesture graceful, distant. They stepped onto the floor, surrounded by spinning couples. From a distance they looked like any pair, elegant in love, lost in music. Up close, their silence was heavier than the melody. "Whatever game you're playing," he said under his breath, "stop before it goes too far." She met his gaze steadily. "Too far? I'm only telling the truth. Isn't that what love's supposed to survive?" He swallowed, eyes darting to the guests. "You'll ruin everything." "No," she murmured. "I'll save myself." The dance ended. They parted with polite applause from the crowd, but neither bowed nor smiled. As she walked away, Ariana caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. The same calm exterior, but her eyes glowed with purpose now. She returned to her table just as Callan raised his glass again for the formal closing toast of the evening. The crowd gathered near the stage, expectant. The lights dimmed slightly, leaving only the shimmer of the chandeliers. Ariana sat still, the faint hum of strings vibrating through the floor beneath her heels. Somewhere in the hall, a projector had been prepared for a slideshow of the newlyweds. Photographs, a surprise presentation arranged earlier by Callan's assistants. Only Ariana knew that before the night was over, that screen would show something no one was prepared to see. The lights dimmed further as a projection screen descended from the ceiling, its pale glow cutting through the golden haze of the chandeliers. Guests murmured in delight, thinking another surprise from the wedding planner awaited them. Callan stood center stage, his arm protectively around Isolde, his smile genuine, unaware of the earthquake sleeping beneath his feet. Ariana folded her hands in her lap, every movement slow and deliberate. She knew what was coming, not because she had planned it, but because life sometimes arranged its own justice. Her phone lay beside her plate. On the screen glowed a single message from an anonymous number. "Ready when you are." Her pulse quickened, yet her face betrayed nothing. Around her, the laughter and chatter continued. Waiters poured another round of champagne. A few guests stepped aside to record what they assumed would be another sentimental display of the couple's journey together. Damien leaned toward her, voice low. "You look tense. What's wrong now?" She didn't answer, just turned her head slightly to meet his eyes. "Watch," she said softly. He frowned. "Watch what?" The room darkened completely. A hush rippled across the tables. Then the first image appeared on the screen, a photograph of Callan and Isolde on their engagement day. The crowd sighed and clapped. Relief spread for a brief moment. But the next image was not part of the slideshow the planner had prepared. It showed Isolde standing on a familiar terrace, sunlight washing over her veil. Beside her stood Damien, his hand cupping her face with unmistakable tenderness. The gasp that followed was sharp enough to slice through the music. Someone near the back dropped a glass. It shattered against the marble floor. The sound echoed like punctuation in a sentence no one wanted to finish. Callan froze. His arm fell from Isolde's waist. For a long second, he didn't move, as if his body needed time to translate what his eyes were seeing. Then he turned, slowly, to his bride. "What is this?" Isolde's lips parted, but no words came. Her face drained of color. Around her, guests whispered behind hands, the way people do when they witness the beautiful crumble. Damien shot to his feet. "That's not what it looks like." His voice cracked, echoing louder than he intended. "Someone is playing games." Ariana stood, calm amid the chaos. "Sit down, Damien." Every head turned toward her. The authority in her tone didn't come from volume. It came from certainty, the kind that made lies wilt. "Don't do this," he hissed. She faced him fully. "Don't pretend, not anymore. Everyone deserves to know who they're celebrating." Callan's gaze snapped to his sister. "You knew?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Ariana nodded once. "I found out this afternoon. I wanted you to hear it from them, but truth hides from cowards." Isolde's bouquet slipped from her hands, landing soundlessly on the carpet. "Ariana, please," she whispered, trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "No," Ariana said quietly. "It wasn't supposed to happen at all." The murmurs swelled until the hall felt like a sea of voices. Cameras that had been raised for memories now recorded scandal. A few guests, too uncomfortable to watch, drifted toward the exits. Others stayed, drawn by the gravity of honesty unfolding before them. Callan took a step toward his wife. "Tell me it's fake," he demanded. "Tell me this is some mistake." Isolde opened her mouth, then closed it again. Tears pooled in her eyes, smudging the perfect lines of her makeup. "I don't know what to say." "Start with the truth," Ariana said. Damien's jaw clenched. "You think you're some hero exposing lies. You've humiliated your own family." "Families don't break from truth," she replied. "They break from deceit." Callan turned to Damien now, his composure fraying. "When did this start?" Damien didn't answer. Ariana's voice cut through again, softer now but clearer. "Callan, you asked me once to face doubt before it breaks you." I remembered. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence felt physical. Then Callan moved. He took the microphone from the nearest table, his expression unreadable. "Everyone," he said, "please remain seated. I think we've all seen enough of the slideshow." The attempt at calmness only deepened the tension. "But before we end it, there's something I need to add." He gestured toward the technician. Another clip appeared, security footage from that morning, showing Isolde entering Damien's suite. The timestamp glowed at the bottom of the screen like a verdict. This time the room didn't gasp. It exhaled, as if admitting what it already suspected. Callan lowered the microphone, his voice barely above a whisper. "So it's true." Damien's shoulders sagged. "It was a mistake. Stop," Callan said sharply. "You made your choice when you stepped onto that terrace." Ariana's knees nearly gave out, not from weakness but from the strange relief that comes when the truth no longer hides. The masks were off. The pretending was over. Isolde fell to her knees, sobbing quietly. "Callan, I love you." He looked down at her, his face carved from disbelief. "Love doesn't destroy what it touches." He handed the microphone back to the announcer and walked away from the stage, each step measured, final. Guests moved aside as he passed, the crowd parting silently like water around a ship's hull. Ariana watched him go, her chest tight. She had freed the truth, but it felt heavier than she imagined. Every eye turned to her again, some in pity, some in awe. She met their gaze without flinching. "Thank you for witnessing honesty," she said quietly into the microphone. "It's the only gift I can offer tonight. This is the moment when silence gives way to truth. If you were standing in Ariana's place, would you have done the same? Comment your answer below and stay with me, because the fallout from this revelation has only just begun." For a long moment, nobody moved. The orchestra stood frozen, bows suspended above strings, unsure whether to keep playing or pack away their instruments. The silence grew heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Callan stopped halfway down the aisle and turned back to the crowd. His face no longer carried the warmth of a groom. It was expressionless, cold with disbelief. "I think," he said quietly, "that's enough celebration for one evening." The words broke the stillness like a stone through glass. Guests shifted in their seats, unsure whether to applaud, comfort, or flee. A few murmured polite excuses and headed for the exit. Others stayed, compelled by shock. Isolde remained on her knees, the satin of her gown pooling around her like melted snow. She reached toward her husband, voice trembling. "Please, Callan, just listen." He didn't. "You've had plenty of time to speak," he said. "You chose secrets instead." She lowered her hand, the diamonds on her bracelet, catching the light as if mocking her. Damien stood behind her, half a step away, torn between shame and arrogance. He looked at Ariana, perhaps hoping for mercy, perhaps for distraction. He found neither. Ariana moved closer to her brother. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she said softly. Callan shook his head. "Don't be. You didn't create this." His voice steadied. "You just refused to pretend." He turned back to the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, tone polite but final, "thank you for coming. Dinner is served for anyone who wishes to stay. As for the wedding," he paused, "it ends here." The crowd erupted in low whispers. Someone clapped once out of nervous habit, then stopped. Isolde pressed her palms against the floor to rise, her tears leaving faint marks on the polished surface. "You can't just walk away," she whispered. "We can fix this." Callan's laugh was soft, humorless. "You broke it in public. Why try to fix it in private?" The statement silenced her. She stood unsteadily, the weight of stairs pressing against her back. Her bouquet lay forgotten, petals crushed underfoot. Damien rubbed a hand over his face. "Everyone's overreacting. It wasn't." Ariana cut him off. "Don't finish that sentence. Every lie you add only deepens the hole you've already dug." He turned on her, temper flaring. "You think you're righteous? You humiliated your husband in front of hundreds of people. You humiliated yourself," she replied. "All I did was stop covering for you." The exchange drew another wave of whispers. To some, it sounded like justice, to others, cruelty, but none looked away. Callan signaled the event staff, his voice calm but firm. "Escort them to the car. They're leaving the estate tonight." A manager approached carefully. "Sir, are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "This place was built for truth. They don't belong here anymore." Damien's jaw clenched. He opened his mouth to protest, but stopped when he saw the security guards approaching. Even pride knew when to surrender. He turned to Ariana one last time. "You'll regret this." She met his gaze without fear. "No, Damien, I already regretted trusting you. That's over now." He looked away first. Isolde hesitated, her hand trembling on the banister as the guards gestured toward the exit. Before she followed, she turned to Callan. "I loved you," she said. He didn't answer. When the doors finally closed behind them, the room felt lighter but strangely hollow. The scandal had left an aftertaste no champagne could wash away. Ariana stood beside her brother in silence. Neither spoke for several minutes. The guests watched, waiting for direction, unsure whether to comfort or congratulate. At last Callan exhaled. "You knew since this afternoon?" "Yes. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I wanted to protect you from humiliation," she said. "But there's no protection without truth." He nodded slowly. "I should have listened to my instincts. Something always felt wrong. I just didn't want to ruin the day." "Some days need to be ruined," she said gently, "so the right ones can begin." For the first time that night, Callan's lips curved into something that almost resembled gratitude. "You're stronger than I realized." Ariana smiled faintly. "I had to be." "The world doesn't pause for heartbreak." He offered his arm. "Walk with me." They stepped down from the stage together, moving through the scattered guests. As they passed, People whispered apologies, words of support, fragments of gossip. None of it mattered. The siblings kept walking until they reached the garden doors, where the night air waited cool and still. Outside, the lake shimmered beneath the moonlight, the same terrace where everything had begun. The scent of roses drifted through the air, sweet and indifferent to human sorrow. Callan leaned against the railing, staring at the reflection of the lights on the water. "Do you ever wonder," he asked quietly, "why betrayal hurts more from family than from anyone else?" "Because it's unexpected," Ariana said. "You build your life around trust. When that falls, everything else trembles." He nodded, eyes fixed on the lake. "What happens now?" "Now." She looked at him. "We stop pretending. We start healing." He gave a short laugh. "That sounds harder than it should be." "It always is," she said. "But it's better than living in someone else's lie." For a long while, neither spoke. The quiet between them wasn't empty. It was the sound of truth settling, making room for something new. Sometimes the loudest part of a story isn't the betrayal. It's the silence that follows. If you're still with me, take a second to like this video and tell me in the comments what you think Ariana should do next. Should she forgive or walk away forever? Your thoughts help shape the stories we share here on Mr. Donovan's Stories. The night air outside the ballroom carried a strange silence, one that didn't feel peaceful so much as emptied. The kind of silence that follows an explosion, where everything still stands, yet nothing is the same. Ariana and Callan remained by the terrace railing, the same terrace that had exposed the truth and severed the illusion. The lake reflected the moonlight in thin, wavering lines, as if the water itself couldn't decide whether to stay calm or ripple with unrest. Guests trickled out of the hall in small clusters, their whispers drifting behind them like faint echoes. Some avoided eye contact with the siblings, unsure whether to offer sympathy or leave them to their thoughts. Others watched curiously from a distance, as if witnessing a scene too compelling to walk away from. Human nature loved beauty, but it loved chaos more. Callan's hands were braced against the railing, knuckles pale. "You know," he said finally, not looking at her, "this morning, I woke up thinking it was going to be the happiest day of my life." Ariana's heart tightened. "You didn't deserve this," she said softly. He let out a slow breath. "No one does. But I can't stop thinking, how long were they planning this?" Ariana hesitated. She had asked herself the same question earlier, in every possible version. "It doesn't matter," she said gently. "The moment it began, whether days or months ago, the trust ended." He turned his head slightly. "How did you walk back inside after seeing them on that terrace? How did you stay composed?" "I didn't," she answered. "Not inside. But I've learned something important the last few years. Falling apart in private is strength, but falling apart in front of people who betrayed you, that's giving them power." Callan absorbed this, his eyes drifting across the darkened garden. Lanterns flickered along the pathway, their flames steady despite the faint wind. Inside the hall, staff began clearing tables, gathering wilted roses and half-finished glasses of champagne. The music had stopped completely. The silence in the mansion felt almost reverent, as though acknowledging what had just transpired. Callan exhaled deeply. "Ariana, thank you for telling me the truth today." Her throat tightened. "I wish it hadn't been today." "So do I. But maybe there's no such thing as a good day for the truth. Maybe it always hurts, no matter when it arrives." She rested her hand lightly on his arm. "Truth hurts once. Lies hurt every time you breathe." He nodded, finally meeting her eyes with something almost like gratitude. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. Everything feels numb." "You don't have to decide tonight," Ariana said. "Some decisions need sleep, others need clarity, and you have neither right now." Callan gave a quiet laugh that held no humor. "You sound like Mom." "I'll take that as a compliment." They fell into silence again, this time not hostile or distant, but heavy with understanding. While Ariana and Callan stood on the terrace, inside the ballroom emotions erupted in less controlled ways. Some guests gathered near their tables, replaying the footage they had secretly recorded. Voices rose in disbelief. I knew something was strange between them. Did you notice her face during the vows? They acted too perfect. That's always a sign. This will be all over social media by morning. And then, I heard Damien tried to argue with Callan backstage, almost got thrown out again. The staff exchanged glances, moving with more urgency now, as though eager to erase the remnants of the disastrous celebration. The flowers were still beautiful, the lights still golden, but the room had lost its innocence. It no longer felt like a place for joy. Near the abandoned wedding cake, Callan's childhood friend Rowan stood with a tense jaw, his fists clenching and unclenching. "If I see Damien again," he muttered to another groomsman, "I swear—" "Don't," the other whispered. "Not tonight. It shouldn't have been tonight at all," Rowan snapped. Upstairs, in the bridal suite, Isolde sat alone on the edge of a velvet chair, staring at her trembling hands. Mascara streaked her cheeks. Her once pristine gown now felt suffocating. She kept replaying her choices, the stolen moments with Damien, moments she once convinced herself were harmless, beautiful, thrilling. Now they looked cheap, shameful, reckless. She whispered to the empty room, "How did everything fall apart so fast?" It had not fallen apart. It had finally been seen. Ariana and Callan remained side by side as heavy clouds drifted across the moon. The night felt colder. "You know what hurts the most?" Callan said quietly. "I thought I knew her, truly knew her." Ariana stared at the soft ripples on the lake. "We never really know someone until we see how they treat trust." He swallowed hard. "What about you? What does this mean for you and Damien?" Ariana leaned her elbows on the railing, her hands clasped loosely. "I don't know yet." "You don't?" he asked, surprised. She shook her head. "I know what he did was unforgivable, but decisions need clarity. Right now, all I have is shock." Callan studied her face, almost afraid to ask the next question. "Do you still love him?" Ariana inhaled sharply, her breath shaky. "I love the man I believed him to be. I don't know if that man ever truly existed." Callan reached over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You deserved someone who honored you." "So did you," she whispered. For a long while they stood without speaking, sharing the same ache in their chests, betrayal rooted in both love and family. Ariana eventually straightened, brushing hair from her face. "I need a moment alone," she told him. Callan nodded. "I'll be inside if you need me. I'm going to speak with the planner and the staff. Try to salvage whatever dignity this night has left." "Don't worry about dignity," Ariana said. "You still have yours." He gave her a faint, weary smile. "Thanks to you." He turned and walked back into the mansion, leaving Ariana with only the faint glow of lanterns guiding the garden path. She descended the stone steps slowly, each one feeling heavier than the last. As she reached the base of the steps, the scent of roses wrapped around her again, familiar, bittersweet, almost mocking. She wandered toward the gazebo at the far end of the garden, where white drapes fluttered softly in the breeze. She stepped inside and sat on the cushioned bench. The quiet here felt different, not empty, but thoughtful, as though the world itself was pausing to breathe with her. Her mind drifted to memories of Damien, his laugh, the way he held her waist, their weekend trips, the promises whispered during late-night conversations. They felt like pieces from someone else's life now, a film she had watched but never lived. She closed her eyes, letting her head rest against the wooden beam. "Why?" she whispered to herself. "Why wasn't love enough?" A voice interrupted her solitude. "Because some people don't understand the value of what they're given." Ariana looked up to see Rowan standing at the entrance of the gazebo. She hadn't heard him approach. "Oh," she murmured. "I didn't know anyone was out here." He stepped closer, leaning one hand against the post. "I saw you walk out alone. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." She offered a faint smile. "I'm standing. That's something." Rowan nodded. "Ariana, I don't know what to say, but if you ever need someone, anything, just ask." Her chest tightened with gratitude. "Thank you, Rowan. I mean it." He hesitated before speaking again. "Do you want me to walk you back inside?" She shook her head. "Not yet. I just need this moment." "Okay," he said gently. "But you're not alone. Not tonight." He left quietly, letting the drapes fall behind him. Ariana leaned back once more, the weight in her chest softening slightly. She wasn't alone. Her brother had her. Friends cared. People saw her strength tonight. She breathed deeply and let the cool air soothe her. After several minutes, she rose from the bench and walked back toward the house. The ballroom lights glowed warmly now, but the mood remained subdued. Callan was speaking with 2 staff members near the stage. A few family friends approached Ariana, offering supportive touches on her arm and quiet words of sympathy. She thanked them each with grace, her composure restored, not because she felt whole, but because she refused to let brokenness define her. Callan approached, looking more weary than before. "The staff is clearing things. The guests are leaving in waves." Ariana nodded. "Good." He looked around, frowning slightly. "Where's Damien?" "I don't know," she replied. "And I don't care." Callan's expression hardened. "I do." His voice held no anger, just resolve, like a man reclaiming order after chaos. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "Upstairs." The way he said it left no room for refusal. Ariana followed him toward the grand staircase. As they ascended, the mansion seemed quieter, colder. The upper hallway was dim, lined with framed portraits of ancestors whose expressions seemed to judge everything happening under their roofs. Callan walked with purpose, his jaw clenched. Ariana followed closely, her stomach tightening. He stopped in front of the suite where she and Damien had been staying. From inside, they heard muffled voices. One was Damien's. The other was unmistakably Isolde's. But this time, it wasn't laughter. It was arguing. Callan closed his eyes for a brief moment, steadying himself. Ariana felt the world tilt. "Callan," she whispered. He held up a hand. "Stay behind me." Then he reached for the doorknob and turned it. The door swung inward with a slow, reluctant creak. The suite's warm light spilled across the marble floor, throwing soft reflections onto the hallway's darker tiles. The sound of raised voices broke off mid-sentence as Callan stepped inside. Isolde stood near the vanity, her veil discarded across the chair like a fallen flag. Damien faced her, sleeves rolled up, his expression taut with frustration. The instant he saw Callan in the doorway, his posture stiffened, guilt flickering through his eyes before he could mask it. Ariana followed a few steps behind her brother, stopping near the threshold. The air inside felt heavier, close with perfume and argument. Callan's voice was measured but cold. "I asked you both to leave." Damien took a step forward, palms up. "Callan, listen, there's been a misunderstanding. We came up here to talk privately to do what?" Callan's question landed like a blow. "To make another plan. To rewrite what everyone already saw." Isolde turned toward him, tears cutting through her ruined makeup. "Please, Callan, I swear I didn't want this to happen." "You didn't want it?" His laugh was sharp and brief. "You had every opportunity to stop it." Ariana stood silent, watching, her heart pounding. Every instinct told her to stay composed, to let Callan have his moment of truth. She knew this was the confrontation he needed, not to lash out, but to reclaim control. Damien's tone shifted, grasping at reason. "Callan, we made a mistake, all right. But you don't throw away years of friendship over one mistake." "You call betrayal a mistake?" Callan asked. "Friendship doesn't cross into deceit. Friendship doesn't find its way into my bride's arms." Damien's jaw tightened. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Ariana stepped forward then, her voice quiet but cutting. "Love doesn't just happen, Damien. Lies do." He turned on her, anger sparking. "You don't get to act innocent. You could have told me earlier you found out. You wanted this spectacle." She didn't flinch. "No, I wanted the truth. You chose the spectacle when you lied." Isolde collapsed into the chair by the vanity, shaking. "Please stop," she whispered. "I can't take any more." Callan's eyes softened for a fleeting second before the steel returned. "You should have thought of that before you brought shame to this house." She looked up at him, desperation surfacing. "I was lonely. You were always away, business, meetings, trips. Damien was there, and I was weak, lonely." His tone cracked. "You were lonely in a mansion full of people who adored you. You were loved, Isolde. You mistook convenience for comfort." Her sobs deepened, echoing in the ornate room. The sound might have drawn sympathy from another man, but Callan's grief had already burned past compassion. Damien tried again, lowering his voice, trying to sound reasonable. "Look, we can fix this quietly. The footage, the pictures, they'll fade in a few days. We just need to control the story before it spreads." Ariana spoke before Callan could. "Control the story," she repeated. "You still don't get it. This isn't about reputation. It's about integrity." He faced her, frustration bubbling over. "You've already ruined us all. What else do you want?" "I don't want anything," she said, voice even. "I want the truth to stand where lies once did." Callan moved closer to Damien, his height casting a shadow across him. "You will pack your things and leave this house tonight. Whatever business ties we had are finished." Damien stared at him, disbelief giving way to anger. "You can't just erase me. You and I built everything together." "No," Callan said softly. "I built everything. You just stood close enough to look important." The line hit its mark. Damien's face hardened, but he didn't reply. Isolde rose shakily, trying to find words. "Callan, please, don't throw everything away. I love you. I made a terrible choice, but I still love you." He met her eyes, steady and unyielding. "Then love me enough to walk away quietly." Ariana felt her chest tighten. Despite everything, part of her ached for her brother, the man whose wedding night had turned into an ending. Isolde reached for him, but he stepped back. The motion was small but final. She lowered her hand slowly, defeated. Damien muttered, "This is madness." He grabbed his jacket from the arm of the sofa. "Fine, you'll both regret this when the dust settles," Callan replied without turning. "The only people who regret truth are those who fear it." Damien's footsteps thudded down the hallway outside. The sound faded until only the quiet rustle of Isolde's breathing filled the room. Callan exhaled, the fury draining into exhaustion. Ariana moved closer to him. "Are you all right?" He shook his head once. "No. But I will be." Isolde looked at both of them, her voice trembling. "What happens to me now?" Callan answered quietly. "You'll go home to your family. I'll have someone take you there in the morning." She covered her face, sobbing again. "I never meant to destroy everything." "You didn't destroy everything," Ariana said gently. "You just revealed what was already fragile." The words hung in the air, simple, final. Callan turned toward the window. The moonlight fell across his face, outlining the edges of a man breaking and rebuilding at the same time. For several minutes the only sound in the room was Isolde's quiet sobbing. The rest of the world seemed far away. Even the clinking of staff clearing the ballroom downstairs had faded into distance. Callan stood by the window, the city lights beyond the glass flickering like indifferent stars. Ariana waited behind him, unsure whether to speak. "Do you remember," he said at last, still facing the window, "how our parents used to tell us that truth is a mirror? It can show beauty, but if you're not ready, it cuts." Ariana nodded slowly. They were right. He turned to her, his expression drawn but calm. "Tonight, it cut deep." She stepped beside him. "And because it did, you'll never fear it again." He studied her for a moment. This sister who had shattered the illusion for his sake. "You've always been braver than me," he said. "Not braver," she replied. "Just tired of pretending." Behind them, Isolde wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. "You both speak as if I'm already gone." Ariana looked at her gently. "You are. At least, the version of you that belonged here is." Isolde rose from the chair, her steps uneven. "What am I supposed to do now? Go back to my family? Face the world?" Callan's voice softened, almost kind. "You'll live. You'll learn what honesty costs and what it gives back. That's all any of us can do after falling." She looked at him, eyes red. "Do you hate me?" He paused before answering. "No, but I can't love you the same way again." The words broke her anew, but they were clean wounds, ones that would heal instead of festering. She reached for the door, paused, then turned toward Ariana. "You think you're righteous, but this pain will follow you too." Ariana met her gaze. "Maybe. But pain that comes from truth is easier to carry." Isolde didn't reply. She opened the door and slipped out into the hall, her sobs echoing faintly as her steps retreated. Callan exhaled, leaning against the window frame. "It's strange. I thought the hardest part would be seeing the betrayal. Turns out, the hardest part is realizing how much of my life was built on trust that never existed." Ariana rested a hand on his shoulder. "You'll build again. But next time, the foundation will be real." He nodded slowly. "And you? What about me? What will you do with Damien?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Let the silence between us speak for a while. He'll hear it louder than any words I could say." They both stood watching the lights below, their reflections faintly visible. In the glass, a brother and sister bound not by tragedy, but by endurance. Later that night, the mansion grew quiet. The guests had all gone, leaving only scattered petals on the marble, floors, and the faint echo of music that had once promised happiness. Ariana walked through the empty ballroom alone. The scent of champagne and roses lingered, bittersweet. She picked up a single fallen petal from the floor, turning it between her fingers. It was soft, fragile, beautiful. Everything love was meant to be, until handled carelessly. She placed it gently on the table and whispered, "No more lies." A voice came from the shadows near the bar. "Still here?" She turned to see Rowan approaching, jacket off, tie loosened. He looked tired but steady. "I couldn't leave without checking on you again," he said. "You disappeared upstairs." "I was with Callan," she replied. "It's done now." He studied her face. "And you?" "I'm standing," she said quietly. "That's enough for tonight." Rowan nodded. "You were brave." She gave a faint laugh. "It didn't feel brave, it felt necessary." "That's what bravery usually feels like," he said. For a moment, they stood in companionable silence. Then he added, "If you ever need to get away from this place for a few days, come to the coast. My family's house is empty this time of year." She looked at him, surprised by the warmth in his tone. "Maybe I will." He smiled. "Good. The sea has a way of clearing noise out of your head. Maybe that's what I need," she said. He hesitated. "Do you want me to stay tonight?" "Not for company, just so you're not alone in this big house." Ariana shook her head gently. "Thank you, but I need to face the quiet myself. It's time I listen to what my heart sounds like, without lies echoing through it." Rowan nodded in understanding. "All right, but call me if you change your mind." He left, his footsteps fading into the distance. Ariana turned once more toward the empty dance floor. The mirrored walls still reflected the glitter of chandeliers, but now they looked like fragments of another world, one that had shattered and turned to something new. She whispered into the silence, "Sometimes destruction is the only way truth can breathe. When trust breaks, it's easy to think the story ends. But sometimes, that's where real stories begin." If you've ever rebuilt your life after betrayal, tell your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video. It helps more people find the courage to tell the truth. Dawn came too early. A pale stripe of light crept across the marble floors of Valemont Manor, spilling over forgotten glasses and bouquets that had begun to wilt. The once golden ballroom now looked like the aftermath of a storm. Chairs askew, petals scattered, silence thick as dust. Ariana stood at the balcony window of her room, wrapped in a silk robe, staring out over the gardens. The sky was the soft color of forgiveness, but she felt none of it. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand again and again, screen flashing with messages. "Are you okay? It's all over the news. You're trending." She didn't open a single one. Somewhere down the hall, she heard Callan's voice on a phone call. Low. Controlled. The way he always sounded when managing business crises. Only this wasn't a business. This was his life being discussed on morning talk shows. A soft knock came at her door. She didn't answer immediately. The knock came again. "It's me," Callan said. She opened the door. He looked as if he hadn't slept at all, jacket gone, sleeves rolled, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "Coffee," he said, holding out a mug. Strong. She accepted it, fingers brushing his briefly. "Thank you." They sat on the small couch by the window, neither speaking for a moment. The quiet felt familiar now, no longer heavy, just truthful. Finally, Callan said, "They're running it on every network." Guests posted the video. Someone sold the photos. Ariana sighed. "I expected that. They're speculating about you too," he continued. "Some say you planned it." She gave a tired laugh. "Of course they do. People hate the one who tells the truth more than the ones who hide it." He looked at her. "You don't regret it? Would you rather I'd stayed silent?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No. I just wish the world was kinder to people who do the right thing." "Kinder worlds don't make strong people," she said softly. He gave a faint smile. "You sound like Dad." Maybe he finally rubbed off on me. They drank their coffee in silence, watching the sun climb higher, lighting the rows of reporters now gathering beyond the front gate. The long lenses gleamed like spears in the distance. By mid-morning, camera vans lined the road. Reporters shouted questions to anyone who passed the iron gates. Is it true the bride fled the country? Was the sister involved? Are the Valemonts pressing charges? Security guards kept them back, but curiosity was louder than any order. Drones hovered briefly before being shooed away by estate staff. Inside, Callan's assistant ran through calls, trying to protect what reputation could still be saved. Public relations teams wanted statements. The family lawyer advised silence. Silence, however, was already being interpreted as guilt. Ariana stayed upstairs, sitting at her vanity, watching the storm from afar. Each ping of her phone brought another headline. Scandal at the Valemont wedding. Groom's sister exposes affair. Truth or betrayal? Society divided. She scrolled once, then put the phone face down. She refused to let strangers narrate her courage as cruelty. Her reflection in the mirror looked older, not from age, but from awareness, the kind that doesn't fade. By noon, Callan entered her room again, a folder in his hand. "I'm calling a press conference," he said. Ariana turned. "Are you sure? You don't owe them anything." "I owe the truth one final defense," he said. "They're twisting it into a spectacle. I need to show them that honesty doesn't equal disgrace." She studied him. "What will you say?" "The truth, as plainly as possible. That the marriage is annulled. That the business will continue under my name alone. That my sister did what integrity demanded." Her eyes softened. "You don't have to protect me." He smiled faintly. "You protected me first." By late afternoon, the manor gates opened briefly to a small crowd of journalists. Cameras flashed. Microphones stretched forward like grasping hands. Callan stood before them, posture straight, voice steady. Ariana watched from an upstairs window, unseen. "My family has always believed that truth is not a weakness," he began. "Last night, painful truths came to light. The wedding you attended ended because honesty refused to stay silent. There will be no further comment beyond this. We choose dignity over deception." He stepped back without taking questions. The statement was brief, elegant, final. The reporters shouted anyway, but he walked back inside, the gates closing behind him with a heavy clang that sounded like closure. Upstairs, Ariana exhaled, feeling something shift inside her, a mixture of sorrow and relief. By nightfall, the estate was quiet again. Most of the staff had gone home. The journalists had dispersed, chasing the next story. The siblings shared dinner at the long dining table, the space between them filled with unspoken memories. When the meal ended, Callan said, "I'm leaving tomorrow for the London branch. I need distance to think." She nodded. "That's wise." He hesitated. "Come with me." She looked down at her plate. "I can't. I need to find out who I am without this name for a while." He smiled sadly. "Then at least promise me you'll rest." "I will," she said. They stood and embraced, a long, quiet embrace that held every word they didn't say. When they parted, his eyes were clear for the first time since the wedding. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'm proud of you. Go heal, Callan," she whispered. "We both will." The following morning broke softer than the last. The reporters were gone, the estate silent except for the distant hum of gardeners restoring the lawn. Ariana packed a single suitcase. She didn't take jewels, only a few dresses, a notebook, and a framed photograph of her and Callan from years ago, when both still believed life would always be simple. She paused at the top of the staircase. The marble floors below gleamed as if nothing had happened. Yet every surface seemed to hold echoes of that night. Applause, gasps, silence. She whispered a quiet goodbye to the house, then walked out into the sunlight. The chauffeur opened the car door. "Where to, ma'am?" She hesitated, then said, "Nowhere yet." "Drive toward the coast." The car rolled through the gates. The air outside the estate felt lighter, saltier, filled with possibility. For the first time in months, she felt free of the cameras, the expectations, the lies. By mid-afternoon, she reached the seaside. The town was small and calm, its harbour dotted with white boats and gulls swooping overhead. She checked into a quiet inn overlooking the cliffs. The receptionist, a woman with kind eyes, didn't recognize her, a relief that felt almost sacred. In her room, Ariana opened the window to let in the ocean breeze. The smell of salt and wildflowers filled the air. She sat by the window and began to write in her notebook. Her handwriting was shaky at first, but it steadied as words began to flow. Truth costs peace at first, but it buys freedom in the end. Love without honesty is a stage play. You know the ending, but you stay for the music. She stopped, smiled faintly, and wrote one more line. "I am not ruined, I am revealed." That evening, she walked along the shore barefoot, waves curling around her ankles. The horizon stretched endless before her, the sea whispering forgiveness in every rhythm. She didn't cry. She simply breathed. A familiar voice called from behind her. "You took my advice." She turned to see Rowan approaching, hands in his pockets, a half smile on his face. He looked almost out of place against the tranquil sea, an echo of her old life standing in the simplicity of her new one. "You didn't tell me you'd come," she said. "I had a meeting in the next city. Thought I'd see if you actually came to the coast. Seems I did." He joined her, shoes sinking slightly into the sand. They walked in silence for a while, listening to the waves. "How's Callan?" she asked. "Better," Rowan said. "He flew out last night. He told me to make sure you're safe." She nodded. "He'll be fine. He always lands on his feet." "And you?" he asked quietly. "I'm learning how to stand on mine." He glanced at her profile, the wind lifting strands of her hair. "You look lighter." "I feel lighter. It's strange. Truth hurts, but lies weigh more." He smiled. "That's the most Ariana thing I've ever heard." They reached a rocky outcrop where the tide crashed harder. She climbed up, laughing softly as sea spray touched her face. The sound startled her. It had been too long since she'd laughed without guilt. Rowan watched her, eyes warm. "That laugh suits you." She looked down at him. "Don't start. Just saying. Some people rebuild with silence, others with laughter. Maybe I'll try both." Later, back at the inn, they shared dinner at a small terrace overlooking the ocean. The sky burned with streaks of orange fading into blue. Rowan raised his glass. "To second chances." Ariana hesitated, then lifted hers. "To honest beginnings." They clinked glasses lightly. As the night grew colder, Rowan walked her to her door. "You'll be okay," he said softly. "I think I already am," she replied. He smiled. "Good night, Ariana." "Good night, Rowan." When he left, she lingered by the doorway, feeling the quiet pulse of possibility. Maybe the heart wasn't meant to remain shattered. Maybe it learned to beat differently after truth rearranged its rhythm. She sat at her desk again, opening her notebook to a blank page. "Tonight, the ocean taught me that tides always return. So will I. She closed the book, extinguished the lamp, and lay back on the bed. Outside, the sea kept whispering. Endless, forgiving, alive. Sometimes walking away isn't escape. It's choosing peace over noise. If you've ever stepped into your own new beginning, tell me how it felt in the comments below. And if this part of Ariana's journey moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's more to come. Morning light poured through thin linen curtains, soft and gold. The little inn by the sea stirred to life with the clatter of breakfast dishes and the cry of gulls overhead. Ariana woke to the smell of salt and coffee drifting up from below. For the first time in weeks, she felt rested. Not healed, healing is slower than dawn, but rested enough to rise without dread. She stepped out onto the small balcony overlooking the harbor. The air was brisk, the horizon washed in silver mist. Fishermen were already returning, nets glinting with water. Each small sound, the creak of masts, the whistle of the wind, felt like permission to begin again. On the table beside her sat a sealed envelope, slid under her door sometime during the night. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, Callan. She opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter, written in his precise script. Little sister, I've reached London. The papers are noisy, but they'll quiet soon. Work helps. Truth helps more. I keep thinking about what you said, that peace isn't found, it's built. I'm starting from the ground up. I hope you're building too. C. Ariana smiled, tracing the initials with her thumb. He would be all right. They both would. She folded the letter, placed it beside her notebook, and whispered to the empty room, "We're getting there." Later that morning, she ventured into the town square. Shops opened their shutters. Children chased each other through narrow streets paved with cobblestone. No one recognized her, which was a blessing. Here, she wasn't a name attached to scandal. She was simply a woman in a white sundress buying bread from a local baker. "New in town?" the baker asked with a grin. "Just passing through," she said. "Well, stay as long as you like. The sea tends to keep people longer than they planned." She thanked him, took her loaf, and wandered toward the pier. She sat on a bench, breaking the bread into pieces, tossing crumbs to the birds. The act was small but grounding. Each wave that struck the rocks below seemed to whisper the same promise: life continues. She opened her notebook again. Peace doesn't announce itself. It waits for you to notice. She smiled faintly and kept writing. The pen moved more easily now, her thoughts less tangled. She wrote about love, loss, and what truth had cost, and how it had also set her free. That afternoon, her phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but the message was short. "Heard you're by the coast. Coffee?" "Ah." Ariana felt warmth stir in her chest. "Rowan." She typed back, "I'll be at the cafe near the harbor at 5. The small cafe overlooked the water, its windows fogged slightly from the steam of espresso machines. When Rowan arrived, he looked different, relaxed, lighter, as if the sea had already done some work on him too. "You look like you belong here," he said, sliding into the chair opposite her. "Maybe I do," she replied. "The town doesn't ask for explanations. Neither do I." They ordered coffee, sat in easy silence for a moment. Outside, gulls circled lazily. Inside, the radio hummed a slow jazz tune. Rowan finally said, "Callan told me about the letter he sent. He said you're writing again." "I am," she said. "It helps me untangle what happened. May I read something?" She hesitated, then opened her notebook and turned it toward him. He read silently, lips moving slightly. "Truth costs peace at first, but it buys freedom in the end." He looked up. "That's beautiful. It's real," she said. "That makes it enough." He closed the notebook gently. "Do you know what you'll do next?" Ariana shook her head. "Not yet. I'm letting life speak first this time." He smiled. "Then listen well. It usually whispers before it sings." She laughed softly. "Always the poet. Only when the company deserves it." After coffee, they walked along the cliffs, the late sunlight turning the waves below to copper. The wind tugged at Ariana's dress. Rowan offered his jacket, but she waved it away. "I'm fine," she said. "I like the wind. It feels honest." He nodded. "You've changed." "I hope so. You're stronger now," he said, "and calmer, like someone who finally knows her own weight." She glanced at him. "And what about you? Still chasing business meetings across continents?" He chuckled. "I think I've had enough boardrooms for a while. Watching what happened to Callan made me realize how fragile success is when built on appearance. I'm taking time off." "To do what?" He shrugged. "Maybe to learn how to live without needing a schedule." Ariana smiled. "We're both learning then." They stopped near the edge, looking out at the horizon where the sea met the sky. For the first time in a long time, Ariana felt no pull to look back. The past had settled. The future didn't scare her. Rowan said quietly, "Whatever you decide next, make sure it's yours. No one else's version of who you should be." "I intend to," she replied. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the water, Ariana returned to her room. She stood by the window, watching the last light fade. The town's lanterns began to flicker on one by one, tiny flames of constancy against the vast dark. She whispered, "This is what beginning again feels like. Not loud, not dramatic. Just steady." She closed the curtains, wrote one final note before bed. "Healing is quiet courage. You wake one morning and realize the ache has turned into air." She set down her pen, smiled to herself, and turned off the light. Every ending holds the seed of a beginning. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let the light in again. If Ariana's calm strength touched you, take a second to like this story and share it with someone who's rebuilding their own peace. And stay tuned. Her next choice will decide where hope truly leads. Days passed gently. The town folded around Ariana like calm water, and she let its rhythm reset her heartbeat. She began to walk each morning before sunrise, notebook tucked under, her arm recording the color of the sea and the smell of the wind. No headlines, no whispers, just the steady hum of life. One morning, as she sat on a bench sketching the line where the horizon met the fog, footsteps approached behind her. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. Rowan had a way of announcing himself without sound. "You're becoming a local," he said, lowering himself beside her. "I'm trying," she answered. "The sea doesn't ask questions." He held 2 cups of coffee, handing one to her. Steam curled into the cool air. "Still taking it black?" "Still pretending I enjoy it," she teased, sipping anyway. They sat in silence, watching fishermen prepare nets. A dog barked somewhere down the street, followed by a child's laughter. The world, unbothered by scandal, kept turning. Rowan finally asked, "Have you talked to him?" "Callan?" "Yesterday. He sounded lighter. He's renovating the London house, says it feels like rebuilding himself." "That sounds like him," Rowan said. Ariana smiled. "He asked if I'm happy. And what did you say?" "I told him I'm learning how." Rowan's gaze lingered on her face, on the steadiness she carried now. "You really are." She looked at him. "What about you? You stayed longer than a business trip." He nodded. "I bought the little marina office down the road. Thought I'd start a small sailing company. From corporate meetings to sailboats," she said, amused. "From chaos to clarity," he replied. "Seems like the right direction." She laughed softly. "I'm impressed." "Don't be," he said. "I just realized I'd rather navigate tides than shareholders." That afternoon, clouds rolled in from the west, dark and heavy. Wind rattled the shutters of the inn. Ariana stood by the window, watching the waves grow restless. She loved storms. They reminded her of herself, beautiful from afar, dangerous up close, cleansing once past. A knock sounded at her door. Rowan again, raincoat dripping. "The harbor's closing early," he said. "I thought you might want to see it before it does." She grabbed her shawl and followed him down the narrow street. The wind pushed at them, salt spray stinging their cheeks. By the time they reached the pier, the sea had turned steel grey, waves striking the rocks with force. They stood side by side under a flickering lamp. The storm built until thunder cracked overhead, startling a flock of birds into flight. Ariana's hair whipped across her face. She laughed over the roar. "It's wild." Rowan grinned. You love it. I do. It's honest. He laughed, shaking his head. You call everything honest lately. Maybe because I spent too long around lies. Lightning split the sky, bright as revelation. Rain came in sheets now, drenching them both. They should have run for cover, but neither moved. Instead, Rowan stepped closer, his voice barely audible over the storm. You know what I think? He said. You didn't destroy your old life, you freed yourself from it. She looked at him through the rain, eyes shining. Maybe that's what truth does. It breaks what's false so the real can breathe. He reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. Then, keep breathing, Ariana. They stood there, rain and thunder their only witnesses. Not a kiss, not yet, just an understanding. Two people who had walked through ruin and still chosen the open sky. The storm passed as quickly as it had come. The next morning dawned clear, air washed clean. The sea shimmered like glass. Rowan met her at the cafe again, both of them laughing at their soaked clothes and wind-tangled hair. We looked like shipwrecks, he said. Maybe we were, she answered. Shipwrecks that found the shore. He raised his cup. To survival, then. To clarity, she corrected gently. They drank in silence for a while. Then Rowan said, I think the sea suits you, because it never hides what it is. Exactly. And because it keeps moving forward no matter the weather. She smiled. That's what I'm trying to learn. He reached across the table, not touching her hand, just resting close enough for warmth. You're learning beautifully. That evening, she returned to the cliffs, notebook in hand. She wrote, Love should never cage truth. If it does, it isn't love, it's fear in disguise. I think I've finally forgiven them, not because they asked, but because I refused to live inside their choices. She closed the book, watching the sun bleed into the horizon, gold fading to violet. Behind her, footsteps approached, steady, familiar. Rowan again, quiet as dusk. Writing? He asked. Yes, about me, he teased. Maybe, she said, smiling. Good or bad? Both, she replied. Honesty, remember? He laughed softly. I'll take it. They watched the sun vanish below the sea, silence resting comfortably between them. It was a silence that no longer carried tension, just peace. Sometimes fate brings back people who remind us that calm doesn't mean emptiness, it means freedom. If you've ever found clarity after chaos, drop A in the comments, like this story. If you believe peace can be as powerful as passion. A week after the storm, a letter arrived. It came by post, the envelope slightly creased from travel, the handwriting unfamiliar. Ariana turned it over in her hands before opening it. Inside were just a few sentences, written in a careful script. Ariana, I've left the city. I needed quiet. You were right. Truth hurts once, lies hurt forever. I hope you find happiness, even if it's far from me. Damien. She read it twice, her heartbeat strangely steady. There was no anger left, only a kind of distant gratitude that he'd finally learned what honesty cost. She folded the letter and tucked it between the pages of her notebook, not as a memory, but as a boundary. That chapter was finished. That evening, her phone buzzed. A message from Callan flashed across the screen. The London branch opens officially next week. I'd like you here. Not for work, for family. Ariana smiled. She stared out at the horizon for a long time before typing back, I'll come. The city greeted her with drizzle and movement. Everything was quick, polished, alive. Callan's new office towered over the Thames, glass walls gleaming even under grey skies. Ariana stepped inside and was met by her brother's assistant, who led her upstairs. Callan was waiting in his office, standing beside the window. When he turned and saw her, his face softened. You came, he said simply. Of course I did. They embraced, holding each other tightly. The last of the tension between them dissolved. When they finally sat, he gestured to the skyline beyond the glass. It's strange, he said. Everything looks different after truth. Even the same buildings. That's because you see clearly now, she said. Clarity changes color. He nodded. thoughtful. "How's the coast?" "Healing," she answered. "And Rowan's there." "He's good for me." A small smile tugged at his lips. "I figured as much." "You sound lighter," she laughed softly. "You sound like Mom again. Someone has to—" They talked for hours, about work, about rebuilding, about the odd peace that follows chaos. For the first time in months, their words weren't edged with grief. They spoke like two people who had walked through fire and found each other on the other side. Later that afternoon, Ariana walked through the city alone. Near the edge of Hyde Park, she spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench, Isolde. Her former sister-in-law looked thinner, paler, her once lavish style reduced to something quieter. For a moment, Ariana considered turning away. Then she stopped. Healing, she realized, meant no longer running. She approached slowly. Isolde looked up, surprise flickering across her face before settling into resignation. "Ariana," she murmured. "Hello, Isolde. I didn't expect to see you again. Neither did I." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the city filling the space between them. Finally, Isolde said, "I've been trying to live quietly. No more events, no more pretending." "That's good," Ariana replied. "Quiet can teach you a lot." "I wanted to hate you," Isolde admitted, "for exposing me. But now I realize you only revealed what I'd already destroyed." Ariana's voice was gentle. "I didn't expose you to punish you. I did it to free myself, and maybe to free you too." Tears welled in Isolde's eyes. "I'm sorry, Ariana, for everything." Ariana nodded slowly. "I forgive you." The words came easily, surprising her with their lightness. Forgiveness wasn't forgetting, it was letting the past stop dictating who she was. Isolde's shoulders trembled with relief. "Thank you." They sat for a few more minutes, quiet but at peace, until Ariana rose to leave. "Take care of yourself, Isolde." "I will." Ariana walked away without looking back. For the first time, the city didn't feel suffocating. It felt alive, open, waiting. 2 days later, she returned to the coastal town. The innkeeper greeted her warmly. "Back so soon?" "I missed the sound of the water," she said. On her desk waited another letter, this one from Rowan, written while she was away. "The sea's calmer now. Feels like it's waiting for you. So am I." Ariana smiled, heart warming at the simplicity of it. She walked down to the pier that evening, the sun low and golden. Rowan was there, leaning against the railing, hands in his pockets. "You came back," he said. "I said I would," she replied. They stood close, the sunset painting their faces in light. He reached for her hand, this time without hesitation. She didn't pull away. "Are you staying?" he asked. "I think so," she said. "For now, this feels like home." He nodded, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Good." They watched the last of the sun disappear, waves lapping softly against the shore. The world around them was quiet. No reporters, no rumors, no noise. Just truth, steady and unafraid. Ariana looked at him, her voice soft. "Do you ever think about how strange life is? How we lose everything we thought mattered, only to find what actually does?" Rowan smiled. "Every day." She leaned her head lightly on his shoulder, the sea breeze cool against her skin. For the first time, peace didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. Sometimes the hardest return is to yourself. Ariana's journey reminds us that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the strength to face it and keep loving anyway. If you've ever rebuilt your life after loss, tell me how in the comments. And don't forget to like this story and subscribe to Mr. Donovan Stories, because every ending deserves its truth. The days that followed were gentle, the kind of gentle that comes after chaos, the kind where silence no longer feels empty, but earned. Ariana spent her mornings walking the shoreline with a cup of coffee, the waves leaving foamy trails around her feet. Rowan often joined her, carrying a camera slung over his shoulder, capturing light instead of deadlines. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. Words were no longer required to fill the space between them. One morning, she stopped near the rocks and looked back toward the town. The wind carried the scent of baked bread from the harbor cafe, the laughter of children echoing faintly. Life had gone on. It always does. She turned to Rowan. Do you ever wonder why we go through pain like that? Why we're given storms instead of calm seas? He took a moment before answering. Maybe because calm seas don't teach you how to sail. She smiled. That's something my father would have said. Then he was a wise man, Rowan said softly. They kept walking, their footprints weaving together along the sand. Weeks later, a package arrived for Ariana at the inn. Inside were 2 letters, one from Callan, another from Isolde. Callan's was short and strong. Little sister, I'm proud of you. The London office thrives. People respect honesty more than I ever thought possible. You taught me that dignity isn't about keeping secrets, it's about facing them. Keep building your peace. Love, C. She smiled, tears warming her eyes. Isolde's letter was longer. Ariana, I'm living quietly now. I've started volunteering at a shelter for women who've lost everything. It reminds me that we're not defined by what we destroy, but by what we rebuild. Thank you for forcing me to see the truth. You gave me the chance to change. Isolde. Ariana read both letters twice, then placed them side by side on her desk. Forgiveness had truly come full circle, not as an event, but as a continuous act of grace. That evening, Rowan took her to the old lighthouse at the edge of the bay. It stood tall and weathered, its paint chipped by years of storms. Inside, the narrow stairs spiraled upward. She climbed them slowly, each step echoing like the chapters she'd survived. At the top, the light turned in slow, steady circles. From here, the entire town stretched below, tiny, peaceful, real. Rowan stood beside her, resting his hand on the railing. You see it all differently now, don't you? Yes, she said quietly. It's strange. For years I thought happiness meant perfection. Now I know it just means honesty. He looked at her, eyes warm with understanding. And love. Love means choosing peace without losing passion, she said. It means truth, even when it shakes you. He smiled. Then you've learned what most never do. She turned to face him fully. I'm not sure if I learned it, or if life taught me the hard way. Does it matter? He asked. Maybe not. He stepped closer, his hand brushing hers, tentative but sure. You deserve a chapter that doesn't hurt. Ariana met his gaze, calm and certain. Maybe this is it. The sea wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of salt and light. Below, the waves broke against the rocks, steady and endless. The lighthouse beam turned once more, sweeping across their faces before fading into the horizon. They stood there, 2 survivors of different storms, bathed in the glow, of something fragile yet unbreakable. Truth turned into tenderness. Months later, back at the inn, Ariana finished her notebook. Its final page read, Some stories don't end with revenge or ruin. They end with quiet redemption. I learned that truth, no matter how painful, is a form of love. Because to love honestly, even if it breaks everything, is to respect yourself and those who remain. The world will always watch what falls apart, but peace begins when you choose what to rebuild. She closed the notebook and smiled. Outside, Rowan's voice called from the pier. Ready? Always, she answered. She stepped outside, sunlight falling across her face. The tide was coming in, new water, new beginning. She took his hand, and together they walked toward the waiting boat, laughter carried by the wind. The sea stretched before them, boundless, forgiving, alive. And behind them, the past finally rested. And that, my friends, is how Ariana's story ends, not with revenge, but with renewal. Her journey reminds us that truth, no matter how costly, always leads to freedom. If you took something from her story, strength, peace, forgiveness, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to Mr. Donovan's Stories for more tales where hearts break only to heal stronger. Remember, your truth is not your weakness, it's your beginning.